Hello and welcome to the PMP New Exam Information Session, where we're going to talk about what's new on this exam. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Barb Waters, and I will be facilitating this boot camp along with Dave. We have Dave in the chat. You don't see him on camera, but he is here, and Dave is one of our PMP mentors. And so if you are thinking about going for the PMP exam, we do have mentors to help you along the way, which is a really nice benefit. So hi, Dave. Hi, everybody. If you are looking at the chat right now, we want to make sure that your default is set to everyone, not just host and panelists. That would just be me and Dave. So if you can set your default to everyone, and let us know where you're joining from. My location is in Colorado in the US, and for me, it's 9 a.m. And so I know for a lot of you, we usually have a global audience in our boot camps. It may be a different time of day, and let us know where you're joining from. So in the chat, you should be able to see the option to chat in. And wonderful. Thank you for starting Atlanta, Georgia. We have Valencia, California, Monterey, Mexico, Toronto, Virginia, New York, the UK. Wow, Cambridge. Yeah, welcome. Indianapolis, Hong Kong, welcome. It is great to have you all with us today. So keep going in the chat, please. I see Kenya and India. We truly have a global audience with us. And I know for some of you, it may not be the most convenient time of day. So thank you for being here. And we are recording this session as well. So if you are continuing to chat, which please do, we have a transcript of the chat that will be available along with the video. And it usually takes us about 24 to 48 hours for the video to process, and it will be added right into the Percipio channel. So if you are not a Percipio user, and most of you are, but if some of you are joining through a different learning platform than Percipio, I'm going to provide you our SharePoint folder, and the link to that folder is right here coming through. So if you need to access the documents such as the syllabus or the recording, we do recommend that you go through Percipio as your first option. Those of you who do have Percipio, that's always going to be your best option because Percipio will track your learning for you, which is always a good thing. So we are going to talk about the PMP exam today. Does anybody know when this exam changed? Just curious if you know exactly when the new PMP changes came through. You can guess if you're not sure. Yes, it was this year. Great, and you're right, it was January. So we keep calling it new. I think the next time we run this information session, we probably won't say new exam anymore because it's been going for a while and we do know what it takes to be successful. So we want to share that with you today. A little bit more about our boot camp, I'm hoping you can help me through a poll. So I'm going to poll and ask you a little bit about your goals for today's boot camp. So I'm going to launch this poll and ask you, what are your goals? So what do you want to do today? Is one of your goals to become PMP certified? Are you already certified and you're just looking for some continuing education, some PDUs? Are you looking to learn just more about project management in general or boot camps in general? So if you can let us know your goals, that would be very helpful. We'll give you a few seconds to answer that. And you can choose more than one answer, by the way. You can choose multiple if more than one applies to you. Okay, so we're going to give this a few more seconds and then I'll share the answers. So 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to end the poll and share the results. 97% of you want to become PMP certified. Well, you are in the right place to learn about the PMP certification. One of you, it looks like, or 3% of you already certified, just want a little bit of continuing education. Today's class will count as, let's see, I think we're going for a 2-hour session. And so we're going to have those 2 hours straight. We will not take a break during this session. Though if you need to take a little time and take a break, you are welcome to. And 23% of you are looking to learn more about project management. 6% of you are interested in Skillsoft boot camps in general. And for those of you who are joining us by the recorded replay session, welcome to you as well. I'm reading these results out loud because they don't pop up for you in replay. So if you are interested in continuing education, you can self-report today's class. So thank you again for sharing your goals for our boot camp. And we're going to talk about today's agenda. So here's what we've got for you. We have the PMP exam content. So what's in the exam? The content outline is uploaded along with your resources. So you will find that in Percipio under the resources tab. It's also in the SharePoint folder that I shared. We'll talk about the PMBOK 7th edition because that often creates questions or confusion about what impact it will have, if any, on the exam. So we'll talk about that. The question styles that you'll see on the PMP exam. Also about the online proctoring, which is something that was introduced just in June of last year, rather new for the PMP exam. The recertification process, what that means is once you're certified, how do you keep your certification active? How do you report continuing education? And then we'll have a sneak peek of the PMI application for the PMP, as well as we'll share some dates with you for upcoming PMP boot camps so that you can begin your PMP journey if that's what you'd like to do. And we have plenty of options for you. So a little bit about our target audience, just to make sure that, that this boot camp is really for you. I'm assuming it is based on our survey results, but we'll just confirm. Anybody who would like to learn more about the PMP exam, maybe why it changed and what the format is. Today's class is not a prep course, but if you're planning on taking a prep course, this class is going to be very helpful. If you'd like to know more about the PMP exam content outline and how the role of the project manager has evolved, we'll talk about that. This boot camp is not part of the 35 classroom hours required to sit for the PMP exam. That's a separate block of time. Anybody interested in taking a PMP boot camp, this would be great for you. It's not a requirement for you, but again, really useful. So what we'll do is talk about how often the PMP exam changes. Does anybody know about how often the PMP exam changes? How frequently do we see updates to this exam? Is it annual? Is it every 10 years or so? It's about every 2 to 3 years, depending on what's happening out there in our environment. So the last time this exam changed was 2018. We had some updates, and in 2000, I believe it was 15, we had a few little updates, but the update is usually in line with something called a role delineation study. So I don't know if any of you have ever received this survey from PMI, but the PMI survey asks PMPs or project managers, you don't have to be certified to complete the survey. What are you doing in your everyday job? What is your job really like? And then based on what they receive in feedback, PMI will adjust the exam accordingly so that the exam reflects the real world. If the exam was just textbook answers, but it didn't really align to the way that we do projects, it wouldn't be a very useful credential. So they want to make sure that it is aligned to the way work is really done. And they also have this job task analysis that make sure that the exam is valid. So the exam content outline, which is part of your resources for this bootcamp, is worth downloading, printing, and using almost as a checklist for studying for the exam to make sure that you understand all of those tasks and skills that are going to be testable on the exam. All right, this is just a sample, a little snapshot from the exam content outline. So we consider it to be like the syllabus of the exam. The outline is several pages, but pages 4 through 10 are really the key. Those are the pages that talk about the tasks and the domains and making sure you know how to set a clear vision and mission. So there will be actual tools and techniques that back that up. Things like the elevator statement or a product vision box. We train those things because they align directly to the task and they're testable. So in our bootcamp, we cover every single task and domain that's in the exam content outline so that you have a complete, comprehensive knowledge base that you can pull from on exam day. So this is a good thing to print or download. All right, I have a little question for you, another poll. And oh, thank you. Dave just chatted the direct link to the outline. Thanks, Dave. That's right from PMI. So I have a pop quiz for you. Are you ready? Which one of these is most correct? PMBOK guide updates lead to PMP exam changes. This is because the PMBOK guide is the main PMP exam prep book. Or number 2, PMBOK updates and PMP exam changes are not directly related. The updates are caused by other factors. So which one is true? This is tricky. Do PMBOK guides updates lead directly to PMP exam changes, or are these updates and changes not directly related, but caused by other factors? All right, we're going to give it a few more seconds. And 3, 2, 1, we're going to end the poll and share the results. So 75% of you said that PMBOK updates and PMP exam changes are not directly related to one another, that there are other factors involved. And then 25% of you said that PMBOK guide updates lead to PMP exam changes. The reason that we had this pop quiz today is that this is probably top 3 of the misunderstandings around the PMP exam updates. And so don't worry, I'm going to share the real answer here. If you didn't know the answer, that's okay. Now you will. Actually, PMBOK updates are not tied to the PMBOK guide updates. I could understand why you would think that. The PMBOK guide is just one of many references for the exam, but it's not actually a test prep tool. So the exam updates are tied to that previous slide, which is the role delineation survey. This is the driver of PMP exam updates along with the exam content outline. When a new PMBOK guide update comes out, it does not mean that the PMP exam will change or realign to match the PMBOK guide. In fact, I am one of the reviewers of the PMBOK guide. Each time I review the 6th, I've reviewed the 7th. Here we go. I'm a little bit fuzzy there. But this is the PMBOK guide, 7th edition. And it's got tools and techniques in here that are absolutely not on the exam. It has information here that's not necessarily pulled into the exam. So you might be wondering, well, then what's the purpose? Why would we have something in the PMBOK guide that isn't on the exam? It's a fair question, and it's because the exam is actually based on this larger reference list of 10 different documents or texts, and the PMBOK guide is only one of those. And this should actually say PMBOK guide 6th edition. So to be clear, even though the 7th edition was released, this exam update happened in January of 2021. The new PMBOK Guide 7th edition was released in July 1st after. So we won't go back and change the exam to match the guide. In fact, the guide is just one thing. We also have the Agile Practice Guide. Those are going to be two really key books. They're helpful, but PMI says that we should note that all of these references are still only one element of a broader set of resources and texts. Well, that's a lot of information, a lot of pages. So the great thing about having a boot camp like the one we offer is that you don't have to worry about this. You don't have to go and pull all of these books. An authorized training partner, which is what we are in ATP, is there to distill all of this information. So we include only what you need to know and nothing more. And so we make the process more efficient, less painful. How many pages do you think are in the reference list if you added all of them together, every page of every book? What do you think that would equal? Just you can guess. It's okay if you don't know. You can just guess. It's like guessing how many jelly beans are in a jar. Okay. 200, 5,000, 3,000, 800, 10,000, 1,000. All right, a few of you got it right. Right, well, very close. It's 5,000, give or take a few pages. 5,000 pages. It would not be worth your time to read these, including, I would say, including the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. Not worth reading because that's not even on the reference list. It's the PMBOK 6th edition that our exam is still tied to. And even that book, we would say, you know, just read the first 3 chapters of that book and we'll cover the rest that you need to know in class. So I hope that's helpful to know that we are going to help you navigate what to study and where to spend your time the most efficiently that you can. So the Authorized Training Partner or ATP program, this gives organizations like Skillsoft the authority or the approval to offer PMP exam prep for the new exam. And that exam prep content, that curriculum, is provided by PMI. So you know you're getting the testable content and that it's going to be relevant to the correct version of the exam as well. So a lot of times if you go out there and you're looking around for exam prep, it's not always clear if the exam prep you're using is updated. And ours will always be updated as an ATP. There are other courses we're allowed to offer, but the one that's really key here is PMP. If you have any questions, you are welcome to chat them in. I know we still have a lot of content to cover, but if you have any questions regarding anything we've covered so far or the slide we're on, just jump right in. So one of the things that PMI noticed when they did the last role delineation survey and they were asking what tasks that everybody was doing on the job, they found out that more and more organizations and project teams are experiencing this state of constant whitewater. We don't expect an exam change in 2022. Good question. Usually it's a cycle of maybe every 3 years or so. And so we do not anticipate an exam change. Now, sometimes PMI will do little things like they'll say, they did this once before. They said, you know, we're going to adjust the exam just a little bit because we noticed that our vocabulary from the PMP to some of our other certifications wasn't consistent. So they did a tiny update in 2000, I think it was 18, to adjust some of that language, but the curriculum didn't change, just a little bit of the vocabulary did. So if they change it at all, we expect that it would be a minor adjustment. Now, they are always changing the exam behind the scenes in a way that we can't see. In other words, they are always experimenting with questions that they'll add. And if you get an experimental question, you won't know. It'll look like every other question. But behind the scenes, PMI is validating that question to see, are we asking that well? Do more people miss it than get it right? Should we adjust it? And so they're constantly experimenting and adding to their test bank, but that's not considered an exam change. That's more about their own quality assurance processes. So when PMI did this survey, the role delineation survey, they realized, wow, due to our ever-changing environment and technology, teams are really adapting more. They are telling us that they have to adapt the plan as they go, that if they use certain styles of project management or certain approaches, that like a plan-driven approach, they end up with rework. So teams are telling PMI, that whole plan-driven approach to projects, it's still appropriate sometimes, but it's not really the way we're doing our work all the time. So PMI took that input and they incorporated it. And we'll talk about how they did, what that looks like on the exam today. But the other thing that project managers told PMI is that the manager role is changing a lot. A traditional project manager oftentimes would be a top-down leader, and they would be focused on tasks and assigning tasks to the team. Now we're moving toward more of a servant leadership approach where it's okay if you don't have the title manager. You could be called a team lead, a facilitator, a coach, it could be a scrum master, and it's servant leadership. So it's more about the leaders supporting the team, and it's very people focused instead of task focused. A question in the chat: how close to the PMP exam questions are the Percipio practice test questions? Great question. Are the topics and tasks and areas representative of the actual test? Yes, they are. And they've been updated too. So we're seeing more alignment to the new exam. The test bank, our test bank has shifted and changed. Some questions are still appropriate, and we needed to add a lot of new questions. So if you get into the Percipio practice test and you take that repeatedly and take it in study mode, that's going to be really helpful for you because you'll also get feedback. If you miss a question or if you get it right, there will be explanations about why the correct answer is the best choice. So I definitely recommend that. Thank you for bringing that up, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Yes, are the self-paced modules still valuable and up to date? Great question. Yes, if you just look for anything that is PMI, and then you're going to see 2021 update. I'm typing that in right now. That's what you're going to look for. And it's 35 courses. They are self-paced, they're valuable, they are up to date. Now, by themselves, are they enough? I'll answer that question in a moment, and you'll help me with a poll. Hopefully you'll help me with a poll, because we're going to talk about whether it's enough to take a boot camp or to take some kind of self-paced training. And I think you'll be interested to know what kind of time commitment this takes. So we'll be talking about that shortly. All right. PMI also collected feedback and learned that, wow, we used to be very process driven. Is there anybody here who was going to study for the last version of the exam, but then, life got in the way and you had to postpone it? And so, okay, that's it. Thank you for volunteering. Yes, so there are some of you who did. I'm glad you're here, because what you're going to see with this new shift is that the old exam was very focused on processes. Oh, a number of you are in that situation. Well, welcome back to the PMP. I think that you're going to like the new the new setup of the exam a lot more than maybe the last version of the exam. The last version was very process driven. You might remember that there were these things called inputs and tools and techniques, and you had to memorize them. And there were a lot of things to memorize that would take you process by process. Well, the feedback that PMI received is that's too prescriptive. Our projects don't work like that or in that order. And so it's not realistic. That's more of a textbook approach. And so PMI said, well, then how do you organize your projects? And the feedback was, first, we look at what the need is. What value can we deliver to our clients, to our customer, to the end user, and let that drive what we're going to do next. So let's say that our customers are looking for an update to an app. You know, it's does anybody in our group here use WhatsApp? That's probably the most popular discussion. Oh, thank you for sharing. So if you also had you were certified, but it lapsed, then welcome back to you as well. I think you're going to see some nice updates to the exam. So let's say that we are the developers for the WhatsApp app. And so with WhatsApp, it's a messaging app, and you can send messages to one another. You can have a group discussion. You could set up video conferencing on it. It does a lot. And let's say that we're the development team and we want to see what is the most valuable feature that we can add to the app next. Well, and maybe our customers tell us a few things that they would like to see. We have to also look at the business environment in that moment. What could be in the business environment that would influence what we decide to develop? Vi, we can talk to you about the practice exam questions, but any of them that are in that test bank are aligned. And so if there's something that you're not sure about, if you could send a screenshot to us through mentoring, we'll always be happy to evaluate an exam question. Thank you for bringing that up. I see that just came to hosts and panelists. Thank you. Yeah. So if we're thinking about creating a new feature or a new product for our customers, why would the business environment influence how we do it? Or what is in our business environment that impacts us, that would cause us to think about it? And this is important for the exam because all of these questions are going to be situational like this. So business environment. What about regulations or compliance? For instance, what if we were creating an app for traffic, right? So there's an app and it's going to tell us about traffic. What if we try to put things in that app that are not okay? Like, it looks like there are police officers over here and you'll get a ticket if you're speeding. Maybe in some places it's not okay to report that information publicly on an app. Or maybe there are other things like letting somebody use the app while they're driving. Maybe that's not okay to do. So we have to think about the business environment and the legal environment. Yep, the environmental factors. So if you take a project that's happening here and you try to put it in a different location, maybe a different country, a different geography, it could be subject to a completely different set of business requirements. Now, or regulatory. People is next. It is fine to have an idea of processes you want to carry out, but really people should choose the processes that work best for them and not the other way around. So this takes the old version or the old approach and it turns it inside out. We used to take the processes first and then build around them, and that's not what we do anymore. So that's the purpose of this slide. Oh, thank you. Dave just shared the updated test prep title to make sure that you're seeing the correct version. So that's the Project Management Professional PMP 2021 update aligned. Thank you for sharing that, Dave. So just in case, that could be if you were accessing an old asset. Okay. This is the traditional project life cycle. It starts with planning, making sure we have a viable project, planning, executing the project, and then closing it one time. We have this ta-da moment at the end. That's called waterfall, plan-driven, predictive is another name for it. So what would happen if we were right in the middle of our project, right here? We're right here and everything changes. So we have a big change. I bet some of you had projects happening maybe in the last year and a half. Oh my goodness, I can't type this morning. There we go. All right. So you were in the middle of a project and you had a change happen. If that happened, how much value was there in the work that you had performed up to that point? Yeah, exactly. We had the pandemic. We have things that would throw your projects off track. So if you were in the middle of a plan-driven project and your work was underway, how much value did you have at the moment that the change occurred? What could you deliver that would be worth something? Where you could say, here, this is working, useful, you can start to use it right now, and we can bill our customer for what we've done. Not much, right? Very minimum. Or it might, yeah, that's a good point. It might be completely trashed. It might not be worth anything anymore. So we have to figure out a way to protect our project from that uncertainty, because sometimes projects could be 6 months, a year, multiple years, and all of that work in progress doesn't have a lot of value. So project managers started to tell PMI, we really execute our projects in shorter cycles. And you could call this an iteration, you could call it a sprint. And it's a way of breaking down the work into smaller deliverables so that we're less exposed. And if we deliver pretty quickly, we also have a moment in time where we can collect feedback, check with our customer, and make sure that we're executing toward the right goals. Yeah. Oh, so you had plans. The business case and the scope was useful because, oh, good one. You had to move to remote work environment. So you had to retrace your steps back to the high level, back to the business case and the scope, right? And it can be tricky. So we have a way of adapting the plan a little bit more frequently and with purpose if we can create shorter increments. So that's the point of the agile project lifecycle, which we're seeing a little bit. All right, a little bit more about the traditional versus the agile life cycle. Now, traditional is predictive. So we go with a plan, we lock in the plan, and we execute to it. It's really good for well-known products and a stable working environment where things don't change a lot in our environment. And so we can plan and execute. With Agile, we have the ability to deliver incrementally. That means bit by bit. We have the ability to adapt every time we finish an iteration. And iterative means that, let's say that we collect feedback from our customer right here. What do you think would happen if we showed our latest product increment to the customer, we delivered it, and they said, oh, I like it mostly, but there are a couple things here that I would like to change. What do you think about welcoming change into a project? It's not very good if it's a traditional project, because that's a lot of rework depending on how late we are in the life cycle. But in Agile, do you think it would be okay to welcome change? It's generally okay. Yeah, I know this, it might feel a little bit odd if you've never experienced Agile, not yet. And it is better to identify the changes early. Yes, you'll have more customer satisfaction, less rework in the long run. And these iterations, the goal, yes, it's very good if you have uncertainty in the product, if the scope isn't well known. But a sprint and iteration should be less than 1 month. It should be 1 month or less. So we haven't really committed too much before we get feedback, and we can iterate, which means if there was something that could be better, then we will make it better. We'll do it again. We'll make some adjustments. So this is the difference between traditional and agile. Agile, incremental. So we deliver bit by bit. You'll see that in a multi-day boot camp. We will ask you to complete a survey for us at the end of every session. And you might think, well, why would you do that? And it's because we can take that feedback from that session, day one, and we can incorporate and make little adjustments to day two if we need to, and on and on. So that's incremental. Iterative is that willingness to make changes, the willingness to go back and make adjustments, and also we add features. With every iteration, we're adding more and more. So that's an agile characteristic. And then finally, empiricism or empirical. Empirical it means fact-based, so evidence-based. In traditional projects, we have formulas. Does anybody remember the earned value management formulas from traditional project management, which you'll learn that in PMP, but it's basically saying, if we have, let's try it this way. If we have a project with a $100,000 budget and a 1-year schedule, let's say 1-year schedule, then halfway through, where should we be? If we're 6 months into the project, how much value should we have created in a traditional project? So $100,000 budget. I'm sorry, I forgot to put a dollar sign on that. A year long, 6 months has passed. Yeah, nice. You knew the formula. The value would be the overall budget times it's actually the plan would be the time passed. So 6 months has passed. We should have created about $50,000 in value. But that's just not the way it works in a traditional project. How many of you create the same value every day of your project? Day 1, day 10, day 100. No, it doesn't work like that, right? It just doesn't. And in construction, sometimes we actually have to take a step back. So for instance, we might have to clear the land or demolish a building or do something like that in order to create the new project. And if we're not able to it's just not a great formula. So with Agile, we base it on real deliverables because we hand off something that actually works every few weeks to a month. So that makes it empirical. In everyday life, I'm going to give you an example of empirical metrics as well. So today, wherever you live, what is the weather like? Is it hot out? Is it cold out? It's cold? Yeah, warm? Cold and rainy. Ooh, here too. Warm and sunny. I want to be there. Raining. Okay. Now, for all of you who said warm, I'm just going to select those of you who said warm. Isn't that a little bit of an opinion? And is there a way that we could make it empirical or more fact-based? What do you think we could do? I just see, thank you. I just saw in the chat something empirical. It was a metric. So you actually gave us the temperature. And so if you tell us this is the temperature, that's fact-based, it's evidence-based, and it's easier to assess projects against that. So if you give us an actual, what degree is it outside, Celsius or Fahrenheit, that's empirical, as opposed to saying, oh, it's warm. Same goes for spicy food. Some of us say we like spicy food, but then by comparison, we have all different opinions of that. So there is something called the Scoville scale that, if you've ever heard of it, that is a metric that measures spiciness. So with traditional projects, scope drives everything. We have to know the scope. And then once we know that, we can figure out the budget and the timeline and the cost. With Agile, we turn this upside down. This is called the inverted triangle. Has anybody seen this before? The inverted Agile triangle? This makes managers nervous sometimes. If you're trying to convince an organization that's never worked with Agile before, it can make things very uncomfortable. Oh, you saw it in the self-paced class. Okay, good. So think about it this way. It's not that scary after all. We have a list of things we want to do for our product, for our project, like a to-do list. I bet you have a to-do list. Do you have one on your phone? Or do you have one written down somewhere? A to-do list? You do? I do too. Is there more on your to-do list than you could realistically get done today? Is it fair to say that your to-do list is longer than you could accomplish in a day or an afternoon? You break it up. And you prioritize. Excellent. That's exactly what Agile teams do. So we're going to pretend that the timeline here is 2 weeks, that the time block is 2 weeks. The cost of that 2-week period is usually based on team salaries. So we're going to use that as the metric. Okay. So based on how much time we have and how much money we have, then we decide which items on the to-do list are realistic. What can we pull from the prioritized to-do list and work on in the next 2 weeks? In order for this to work, the scope has to be broken down. And I saw that some of you do that. I saw that. I break it up. Smart. That's Agile. If the smaller you can break the scope, the quicker you can deliver value. And so that's the way the Agile approach works. A little bit different than what we see with traditional. There are also hybrid approaches. If you want to know more about this, I would recommend the Agile Practice Guide. I know I said if you're working with an authorized training partner, we'll condense everything you need to know. But the PMBOK Guide 6th edition and the Agile Practice Guide are worthwhile. The Agile Practice Guide is less than 100 pages of reading. It's really good. And it talks about hybrid approaches, but we'll talk about them a little here. So in reality, not every organization has adapted Agile approaches. Not everyone has. So sometimes there will be an Agile part of your project and a traditional part, either because you're working with a vendor and one of you is Agile and the other isn't, or you're working with a government entity maybe that isn't Agile. So you have an Agile approach, but then you have to roll out your product in a traditional way. So this example right here of Agile side by side with traditional could be an Agile team working inside a traditional organization or a vendor working with you side by side. Over here, the Agile with the traditional, Agile first, then traditional, that could be like medical trials where we want to get feedback very quickly to make sure our new medication or our new medical device is helpful. not harmful. And so we're seeking very quick feedback and adapting as we go. But then maybe when it's time to roll it out, there might be some kind of regulatory authority that requires certain steps to be followed in a certain order. Can you consider a project that is traditional in development and incremental in delivery a hybrid? Yes, you can. So I'll give you an example of this. Maybe you are in manufacturing, okay, and that's usually a traditional environment. Manufacturing, it's the processes are very defined. But then, what if we wanted to roll out a pilot? What if we wanted to, for instance, change the packaging, but we only want to try it in one region? So we pilot it. That would be considered a hybrid model. Absolutely. Or we're a manufacturer and we want to do some taste testing to see if our customers not like a new flavor of the snack that we're creating. So then we could take a little agile approach in our normally traditional environment. And that would be another example. Okay. And then this is just another hybrid. There are lots of different hybrid models. If you wanted to read more about it, the Agile Practice Guide is a great starting point. If you join PMI, there is a charge for that. PMI has a $140 annual membership, but it's worth it because you save $150 on the price of the exam, and you also get downloadable copies of the Agile Practice Guide and the PMBOK guides, both the 6th and 7th, at no additional charge as part of your membership. So it could be really worthwhile. All right, with all of this, it's time for another pop quiz. So let's do this next one. Pop quiz. What percentage of questions on the PMP exam are based on agile or hybrid approaches? 0% because the PMP is based on traditional project management. PMI has other exams for agile. 25% because approximately 25% of projects are agile. 50%, it's based on a survey that PMI conducted, or it varies because the exam questions are randomized. It could be anything between 0% and 100%. Tricky. All right. I see a lot of you split between all of these answers. So you'll know in just a moment. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Okay, the top answer. Many of you said, 56% of you said it varies because the exam questions are randomized. So you could get anywhere between 0% and 100%. 30% of you said it's 50% based on a survey that PMI conducted. 12% of you said that it is 25% because that represents what percentage of projects are agile. And then 2% said PMP is based on traditional project management. So the right answer is actually 50%. It's based on the role delineation survey that PMI conducted. Now, the last answer was a trick. The PMP exam questions are randomized. That part is true, but they're randomized within domains. So if I sit down and take the exam next to you and we all sit next to each other and take the exam, what would happen is we would get randomized questions and the answers would be randomized from this really large test bank, but we would still get the same percentage of questions from each of the domains. And that also includes the agile distribution. So that is the reason that 50% is the right answer. So now you know. And will this percentage be the same in 2022? It's expected to be. PMI hasn't made any announcements at all about updates, and I would be a little bit surprised because that would be off cycle. They have not done another role delineation survey since the last one that led to this exam change. So we shouldn't see any updates like that. What was the percent? So I think I've cleared the results. Let me see. Nope, I didn't. Here, I'll share it again. All right, so it looks like 30% of you got it right. 56%, I think, fell for that trick because you probably did know that the exam questions are randomized, but you're going to still see the same percentage roughly of agile and hybrid questions and the division across the exam domains. Yeah. These polls, thank you for doing these. Okay, we're going to go on to the next part, which is the answer, 50%. It also has some questions about how to transition from predictive to agile. So you'll see that a lot. You're working on a team that's thinking about taking on agile approaches. What should the team do? You know, the answer is never prescribed. So if it says you're the project manager, you tell them to do it this way, that's not generally the right way to approach it. You will work with the team to identify the best approach. That's the way a servant leader works with the team. And then we'll also see a lot of agile incorporated into our teams, because we'll talk about Scrum, which is the most popular agile framework. It's a framework. We do have a class here at Skillsoft called the Intro to Scrum. I highly recommend it. It will help you, and you can watch it on replay. It doesn't count as your PMP bootcamp hours, but it's really worth it. So the Intro to Scrum replay, if you want to learn about what Scrum is. So we'll also be comparing predictive against agile on the exam. So you'll be looking for those words: incremental, iterative, empirical, adaptive. Those are going to be your agile terms. A minimum viable product. So not delivering everything all at once like we would in a traditional project, but just starting with whatever would make a product valuable and useful, and then building on it. So a minimum viable product, let's use an example of a video streaming service. Does anybody use Netflix or Amazon Prime or Disney Plus or any of those? Are you familiar with Hulu, Vudu? There are all sorts of, if there's one I missed, feel free to type it. Yeah. So if we were a brand new team trying to introduce a streaming service that was going to compete with one of those, with Netflix or Amazon Prime, and we needed to start with a minimum viable product, maybe we would just have something very basic where the customer can come into the service, they'll see a list of movies to choose from in alphabetical order. Then they can select the movie, pay for the movie, and then when they're done, log out. Very basic. That's a minimum viable product though, because the customer can complete something that adds value. Over time, we can deliver more and more. Maybe we can make our search engine better so that over time, we'll add things like you could search by the movie title. You can search by the year the movie was released. You could search by the actor, actress name. In the payment field, maybe we can add some features like they can pay through a third-party service like PayPal or Apple Pay or something like that. And we'll just keep making it more and more robust, but over time, incrementally. That's definitely an agile characteristic. Definition of done is agile. So that means that at the end of the 2 weeks or however long our sprint is, we're going to assess our deliverable against the definition of done, what we said it should be. And that's a checklist we create before we go into the iteration. Here a few more terms: Scrum, Lean, Kanban. Those are also covered in the Agile Practice Guide and testable on the exam. So Agile or exam domains. There are 3. So we're going to talk about the prerequisites for the exam. The actually PMI.org, Dave chatted this in earlier. If you want to know more, you can find out about the exam prerequisites, get that exam content outline, and the handbook, which is also added to your resources folder, and in Percipio, you can get the handbook there as well. So PMI has all of this, but we've brought it together for you here. There are 3 exam domains: people, process, and the business environment. So thank you. Thanks, Dave. You just chatted it for us. People, process, and the business environment. Process is important. People are important, but the business environment, even though it's only 8%, is extremely important because it sets the stage for our project, and it's going to include things like the environmental factors, if there are government regulations, in the marketplace, if we're examining the marketplace to see what is the consumer demand like right now, how's the economy looking, even if we need to hire team members, what's the going rate? That comes from our environment too. So these make up the domain or the exam domains: 230 minutes, 180 questions, and there are 2 10-minute breaks in the exam. We'll talk about the pace of the exam coming up soon. You'll see that. So something that we provide, or that is part of working with an ATP, so an authorized training partner. Remember how earlier I said that you get access to the actual testable curriculum from PMI? That comes from something called a learner kit. This is brand new to anybody who worked with us, Skillsoft, before 2021, or if you took an earlier version of the exam or you were studying before. This learner kit is a new concept. Now, for many of you, your employer will purchase this for you. It'll be part of your, when you go to boot camp, the employer will purchase it. For those of you whose employer won't purchase the learner kit and you need to purchase it on your own, you can. And we actually have a video about the learner kit. I did not pull this into this boot camp because you definitely don't need it until you start taking a PMP boot camp. When you visit us in a PMP bootcamp, we'll give you everything you need to know about the learner kit. But I wouldn't purchase this until you start the bootcamp because it won't do you a lot of good unless you're training and taking the PMP exam prep bootcamp. But it's still helpful to know what's in here. So the PMP learner kit includes a student manual that's going to be very helpful. Now, is the learner kit required? You do not need this learner kit to just take the class for continuing ed. How many of you are already certified active PMPs? Just wanted to see what's new, just wanted to see how things are changing on the exam. Okay, I don't see any. And okay, 1. And that kind of matches our survey in the beginning where 97% of you said you want to pursue the PMP. So you don't have to take it if you're not planning to sit for the exam, but you do need it if you're taking the boot camp with Skillsoft and working with an authorized training partner. So what's in this learner kit? It's about there are a lot of great things. The slides for our class are in there, but also the manual, the student manual, 300 pages. So remember we said 5,000 pages. This is condensed now. You only have to deal with 300 pages that are aligned to the PMP bootcamp curriculum. And that's going to save you a lot of time and it will be more efficient too. The student manual is divided into 5 sections. So the first 3 or lessons. So the first lesson is to create a high-performing team. Number 2 is to start the project. And then from there, doing the work. And then the last two are keeping the team on track and keeping the business in mind. So these are all part of your student manual and really worth reading independently from our class. A question came in to host and panelists. Does the learner kit include a big set of practice exam questions? It does not. PMI does provide, I think, I've heard it's 200 questions. But I'm going to tell you, there have been a few little issues with the first few versions of those where they had a lot of typos and issues. So I would actually recommend that you use our test prep because it's a larger test bank and it's been around for a little while. So if we see that there's a, a typo, we fix it. And so my recommendation is to use the student manual for your reading that goes along with the boot camp, but to really use our test prep because I think it's a better product that's been around a little longer. And then PMIs can just be extra. That would be just, okay, I'll look at these two. If you're associated to PMI, does this include the learner kit or is it an additional cost? Great question. For PMI members, there isn't necessarily any discount on these because PMI members aren't also all certification candidates. So unfortunately, PMI doesn't give you a discount on the learner kit, but they do give you that great discount on the exam fee. You save $150 on the exam. The learner kit, just so you know, oh, thank you for your question. That was a good question. So $110 for the learner kit, but we want to make sure that you don't run out and try to purchase that until you know if your employer will pay for it. By far, most employers will purchase the learner kit. So when you're in boot camp, we'll cover this in much more detail, but I wanted to give you a heads up on it. The nice thing about working with an ATP like Skillsoft is that we're going to take this learner kit and we're going to enhance it. So there are course files that contain the PMI standard curriculum, and then we're going to take it and we're going to add things like extra slides, videos, and more information that would be useful and really aligned to the exam. Sometimes PMI will have a slide that has bullet points of things you need to know, but they don't explain the concept. So if we see, oh, they didn't really explain that, we should. So we'll add slides and content in there for you. Does the learner kit come in soft form or physical workbooks? When you are, thank you, Dave. Yeah, it's digital. Thanks. You can download it. If this makes you feel any better, I have explored the cost of having it shipped, and it's so expensive that you would be better off getting your digital and taking it to a printer near you. If you wanted to have a physical copy of it, it would be much less expensive than having them ship it. It can cost sometimes, I think I've seen for one kit, $35 to ship it. And then it gets less and less expensive when you have more and more kits. So better to probably do it on your own. All right, another quiz here. If you can help me out, we're going to have a pop quiz. How many hours should a PMP candidate plan to study for the best chance of passing the exam? A highly experienced project manager doesn't need to study. They will already have the required knowledge. 35 hours, because a good PMP bootcamp is considered a complete study program. 80 to 100 hours, and it's a good idea to pace your studies over 60 to 90 days, or 10,000 hours, because that's how long it takes to become an expert in a topic. All right, I'll give you a few seconds to answer that one. This is also a little bit tricky. All right, 3, 2, 1, and we'll end the poll and share the results. 92% of you said 80 to 100 hours, and it's a good idea to pace your studies over 60 to 90 days. You are exactly right. That is the right answer. You know, I think it's fair to come in here and say, well, it's a boot camp, it's exam prep, right? So 35 hours and I should be all set. And the 10,000 hours, you might recognize that actually comes from Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers. So there is a concept around the 10,000 hours to become an expert. But the good news is you can sit for this exam without being an expert in project management. I think that I learn things every day, and you probably will too. So it's okay if we come in without the 10,000 hours yet, although I'm sure many of us do have that. But 80 to 100 hours of studying, that's what we are going to be looking. This is exactly how it works. Boot camp, that's 35 hours. We recommend that you put that together with Percipio, which the PMI 2021 update has 35 courses in it. If you put those together, you're almost there, but add the test prep and that will take you to the full amount of time. So the nice thing is we're not just saying, oh, you have to find a way to fill the 80 to 100 hours. We're giving you a plan of that will be successful, that will add up to around 80 to 100 hours. And the boot camp can be in any order along with Percipio. So it is highly recommended that you do this. Is there anybody here who does not have Percipio? And if you don't, it's okay. It's that's fine. Okay, we've got a few of you who do not. Sorry, I'm leaning to look at my, if you do not, we have a trial that you can try out. It is a 14-day trial, and I will chat that in. You can try it out. And then after that, you can pay monthly if you want to, just for your time that you want to use for exam prep. And then when you're done, it's okay to but I think you're going to like it because you can then earn your continuing education in there. So there's a really good reason to keep going with Percipio. Would you like to see an example of a Percipio video and the style? Now, some of you have already seen, you've been in there and you've been using the content in Percipio, but not everybody has probably seen what it's like. So what I'm going to do is I'll turn off my camera for a moment, and I'm just going to have this video play. It's only 4.5 minutes, but I'm going to give you a little heads up. We're going to stop the video twice to answer questions together. So you'll want to pay attention while the video is running so that you'll be ready for the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and play this now.
Imagine that you are at a racetrack and one of the race cars comes in for a...
Oops. Sorry, everybody. It looks like I can't turn off my video or it pauses. So I'll just stay on camera.
Pit stop.
There we go.
Imagine that you are at a racetrack and one of the race cars comes in for a pit stop. In addition to fuel, the car needs new tires. The spectators watch as a single pit crew member changes each tire one by one. And after about 25 minutes, the car returns to the track. Unfortunately, the race is already over. What went wrong? Sometimes time is a constraint that can't be negotiated. A new ski gondola must be installed before opening day. A new cruise ship must be ready to transport passengers who booked their voyage a year in advance. And a bride's dress must be completed before her wedding day. When a project timeline is critical, meeting that timeline may require additional resources. And additional resources means additional costs. Now let's get back to that pit stop. Isn't it more likely that there would be 8 highly skilled crew members, 2 per tire, working to quickly get that race car back on the track in order to win the race? This is an example of schedule crashing, a schedule compression technique. When you need to compress or reduce the duration of an activity, you may assign more resources to it. When we designate additional resources for an activity in order to compress the schedule, it comes at a cost. Crashing is expensive, but it is a great option if your schedule is the top constraint for your project. It is important to understand that not every activity can be crashed. Activities such as downloading files or backing up servers cannot be compressed by adding more resources. However, for the remainder of this discussion, we're going to assume that the activities can be crashed. Let's say that today is June 1st and you're in the middle of a 12-month project. Everything has been progressing well and your project is on schedule. You are also proud of the fact that you've been coming in under budget. Then you receive a visit from your sponsor that changes everything. Your sponsor says, "Due to unexpected circumstances, we must finish this project 1 month early. We must finish by the end of November, no matter what it costs. Just get it done." Think of this scenario in the context of crashing. If today is June 1st, how can you best utilize this technique to finish your project a month ahead of time? If you'd like more time to think about your answer, just pause the video and resume.
We're
Today
going
is
to do
June
that.
1st.
We're going to pause here. And today is June 1st. Let's see if I can get a clearer picture of our video here to share with you. I'll find the correct minute mark. Here we go.
Today
There
is
you
June
go.
1st.
All right, so let me restate the question. We're going, first of all, so far, I want to check in with you. How was that video? Did it make sense so far about how we want to add more resources to make the activity take less time? Did that make sense with the pit stop example? Okay, good. Now we're going to take that pit stop example and we're going to apply it here. So today is June 1st. What activities are happening today? Looks like we just finished purchasing tablets. So now we have load database and develop the application. Now there's a little bit that you don't know because this video, we just pulled it right from the middle of the training. So I'm going to share a few things with you. This is called the critical path. This path that's in red, it's critical because where's the wiggle room in the schedule? Do you see any breaks between activities where we have a pause of a month or even 2 weeks where we can, if something runs a little late, it's okay? Or are we really just back to back until the end of the project? What do you think? That looks pretty stressful, doesn't it? Path 3, everything has to happen. If we are late developing the application, then it's going to make everything else late because everything happens in that order. What about over here, loading the database? Do we have some wiggle room in that path of our schedule? Looks like we have some wiggle room there. Where do you think it would do the most good to add resources? Would it be here in the load database? Or do you think we should do it here in the develop application? Where do you think it would make the most sense? I see, put it on the critical path, put it here. Okay, let's find out. Let's go ahead and continue the video. We'll see.
First, how can you best utilize this technique to finish your project a month ahead of time? If you'd like more time to think about your answer, just pause the video and resume when you're ready. If you suggested adding resources to the develop application activity, that is the best answer. Why? First of all, it only makes sense to crash activities that are on the critical path. That is the only way to compress your overall schedule. Also, the sooner you address the issue, the better. The develop application activity is the only activity available to crash since it is occurring right now. If you wait too long, the opportunity may slip away. You will continue to approach the final project activities, which are on the critical path. What exactly would you do to crash this activity and compress the project schedule? Feel free to pause the video at any time and resume when you're ready.
How do we crash? How could we do it? You crashed your car. Different kind of crashing, but yeah, add more developers. Yeah. You compressed your bumper. That's funny. Yeah. Add more developers. Okay, that's great. That's usually what we see, add more resources. Exactly. Sometimes certain activities can be crashed by upgrading systems and building efficiencies there. But I like where you're going here with the hiring more developers. That's a great idea. So we'll resume the video.
If you suggested adding resources to the develop application activity, you are correct. The number of resources you add can be determined using parametric estimating. The more resources you add, the shorter the activity duration will be, at least until the point of diminishing returns. At some point, you will achieve the most efficient staffing level for the activity. Any more resources will not result in a shorter duration. Once you estimate the appropriate number of resources to add to this activity, you can determine the cost and update the schedule baseline and budget baselines accordingly. In summary, crashing is a schedule compression technique that involves adding resources to an activity in order to reduce its duration. Crashing adds cost but can be effective in getting your schedule back on track.
Okay. Oops. Let's
Imagine that
stop
you are
that.
at a
Okay. I love the discussion in the chat. You are really in tune with projects here because I saw a suggestion to revise the scope, which you're absolutely right. If we didn't have the money to crash and this and we needed to figure out a different way to solve the problem, the way we might do that is to de-scope the project, take a little bit of the scope out, and then that, remember our triangle. So if one side of the triangle changes, the others usually do too. And that's why the budget is affected. And this is such a good discussion. Yeah, you have to think about the shortage of resources and that we have to go back to the project environment and look at things like the market influences of how much it costs to bring a resource in. And then some of you even know that crashing is not the only technique that we're able to use. So thank you, Stephen. You mentioned leveling. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's Stefan or Stephen, but you are so on it. Yes, there are going to be 4 different techniques that we can use, and you'll learn about them when we take the PMP bootcamp. So that was just a sample, but I'm glad to see how much discussion this sample has created. And you are right, crashing doesn't always work. So using the example of one woman takes 9 months to have a baby, but 9 women can't help and crash the schedule for 1 month. That is a really good example. Also, the downloading, backing up servers, that kind of thing, it takes as long as it takes. It's like the idea of boiling water. You can't add 3 people to the task of boiling water. It's still going to take as long as it takes. Good. Yes. And there's so many considerations too, like the skill sets. So well done, everybody, with the discussion. This is the way PMP is. So did you notice how the chat picked up and we started to have more conversation? That's how our PMP bootcamp is. So I welcome you to attend. I hope that you will. Please tell your friends, tell your colleagues, and we'd love to see you in bootcamp. I'll give you the dates coming up. So for now, we're going to shift and talk about the PMP exam experience a little bit. And so you can take this online or in person. Either way, it's proctored by Pearson VUE. The thing about being proctored online is that you really do have to have a stable internet and you can't use a work laptop. And that's because a lot of our work laptops have security features that do not allow anything to be downloaded. And the online proctoring requires software because they're going to want to make sure you're not running any background applications that would cause the exam to not be a valid exam. They won't usually let you have a second monitor and things like that. So you'll just want to make sure you have stable internet and your own laptop if you are planning on taking the exam from home or remotely. The question types, we'll talk about that a little bit. So, situational. You are always going to be in a dilemma or have a situation that you have to solve. Very few of these questions are just fill in the blank. So there are 5 question types. Either click on a chart like a hot spot. So for instance, you could look at the life cycle of the agile approach, and it might say which point in the chart would indicate the end of one iteration and the start of the next, and you'd have to find that spot on the chart and click. Fill in the blanks, a little bit of that. Drag and drop, or putting things in a certain order. There are also a few questions that have multiple right answers, but the good news is it will tell you pick the 2 correct answers or pick the 3 correct answers so that you don't have to guess how many. But most questions are just one right answer, and that's the old format of the exam too. This is the flow of the exam. So there are 180 questions. You have 230 minutes. There are 2 10-minute breaks that are, so the exam is broken into blocks of 60 questions, 3 blocks. You don't have to take your break. You can skip it if you want to, but I do recommend that you take it, at least stand up and stretch. And that would be pretty helpful. You can't go back to any questions that once you get to this break, you will have submitted your questions, your 60 questions. You can't go back, because if you take a break, or even if you don't, PMI wants to lock down that part of the exam. If you went to take a break and maybe you were referring to some study materials on your break, and then you could come back and get back into a previous question, that would make the exam not valid. So when you submit 60 questions at a time, you need to be very careful with your time management, because PMI does not time block these. They will just keep counting down from 230 minutes. So it's up to you to figure out how much time should I take per question. Give yourself about a minute per question. Now that's an average. Some questions you're going to answer in 10 seconds, and some will take a few minutes, but you can pace yourself. And the good thing about scoring early wins, what does that mean? When you're taking the exam, sometimes you're going to hit a question that just, it's like, I don't know, or I'm feeling a little bit like I'm not in a groove right now. Like my very first question was 2 paragraphs long, and I'm not ready to start the exam with a question like that. Just skip it. It's okay. You can go back before you submit that block, and you can make sure that all the questions are answered. So it is okay to skip and to move around. But once you do submit those, you can't go back. So make sure you answer all of them, because there is no negative scoring. That means that you don't lose points for getting a question wrong, but if you skip it, you're not even attempting to have to just be lucky and get it right. So you were going to ask that question, yeah. And so make sure you answer all of those. Now there's also a whiteboard, which is very helpful to practice with. So Pearson VUE has a practice whiteboard that you can try. And it's a good idea to not learn the whiteboard on exam day, because you can see there are a lot of little controls here, and it would be good. The very first one that I would learn is how to make the font size as small as you can and still be able to read it, because the font size defaults to a very large font. So practice in that whiteboard if you think that you're going to be taking the exam from home. And then strategy for studying. Read every question, read all of them. And oh, this should be, I just spotted an error on my slide. My apologies. This should be a new bullet point. Read the full question. And so when you read the full question, you're making sure you know what they're asking, and read all of the possible answers, because they might be asking for the best answer. Number 1 could be correct. Number 2 could be correct, but maybe number 3 is the best answer. So read all of them. It's about solving problems and making decisions. Follow your plan for exam day, but be ready to be agile. This happened to me. And of all certifications, it was one of my agile certifications. And I was in the exam center and I was pretty sure I had studied well for this exam. And I get to the first question and it's really, really hard. And so I just say, you know, going to skip that one. I had to skip 6 questions to finally find one that could build confidence, that I was like, oh, finally, this is good. And then all of the rest of the questions were okay too. So I don't know what happened, but when I went back and I answered those first 6 questions, they were still the most difficult 6 questions on the exam. I don't know if that was supposed to throw me off and maybe make me panic, but stay calm and you'll be okay. So you have to be ready to be agile in case something odd happens like that. Yeah. So in the chat, if you're taking the test at the test center, can you use pencil and paper? So what they do at Pearson VUE is they use this little wipe. It's not a whiteboard. It's more like a really large laminated piece of paper. And then you have a dry erase marker and a cloth to wipe it. And so be careful that you don't cover it. Like I've heard from students who leaned their elbow on it and they accidentally erased what they had written onto their sleeve. So be careful there. But I don't know if they've made any changes with COVID. I have not heard of them switching to the electronic whiteboard. So far as I know, they still use the laminated paper. And then words like always, never, or absolutes, yeah, they're typically not correct. Good. Look for those. And if you have your hand raised, if you have a question, absolutely chat that in. Put that in the chat for us. And let's see. Yeah, so tips. Decide where you're going to take the exam, testing center from home, work on time management using our exam prep, the test prep, and then create a plan for exam day. All right, are you ready for a pop quiz? We have another one. All right, this one is, what is the passing score on the PMP exam? Is it 90%? You have to get a 162 out of the 180 correct. Is it 80%? You have to get 144 out of 180. Is it 80% on at least 2 of the 3 exam domains? Or PMI doesn't share the scoring system or pass rate. So which one is it? This CBE, I'm looking in the chat for CBE. Computer based, center based. Thank you. As far as I know, they currently still use the erase board in the testing center. I don't think that they've gone to the electronic whiteboard. All right, we're going to reveal the answers in 3, 2, 1, end the poll, share the results. It's very divided, with 57% of you saying 80% you have to get 144 out of the 180 questions. 37% of you said PMI does not share the scoring system or pass rates. PMI does not share their scoring system or their pass rates. They're very secretive about it. And, you know, I, working as an ATP and as being really closely involved in PMI, I've always listened carefully to see, maybe I'll learn, maybe I can overhear some kind of tips. No, they are very secretive. So if you said, wait a minute, I hear 80% all the time, here's the reason you're probably used to seeing that 80%, because that's how many questions you should be getting right on the test prep for us to be pretty confident that you're ready for exam day. So the 80% is most test preps or exam simulators out there are going to set 80% as that threshold. If you can get 80% pretty consistently, you're ready. But PMI, they don't share. So I always think that's interesting because they do not tell us what it takes. They just say you need to pass the 3 domains, and that's all they tell us. But take the test prep and you'll be ready. Recommendations. Yeah, so you won't get a grade. You're correct. You will just get above target or meets target. And what we're aiming for, of course, is we want you to get above target in all 3 domains. So it's by domain. You do need to pass the domains with meeting target or above target. But we really want to make it a goal that you get above target in all 3, because it's just extra celebration. You passed and you passed with above target. Yeah, that's what we want. So recommendations. Do you get a certificate or a letter? You do. So here's what happens on exam day if you're taking it computer-based. If you're at home, here's what our candidates are telling us. I was done with the exam. I turned it in, and all of a sudden the screen flashed for barely a second, and it said congratulations, and then it was gone. And there's panic because like, wait, where did that go? I wanted to take a screenshot or something, or are you sure? Did that really happen, or did I imagine it? And so you will get an email the next day that confirms from PMI that you did pass, and then you'll get a certificate. I don't know if they've moved to downloadable. I got mine through the mail, but it's been a long time. So oh, it happened to you too, Dave. Yeah, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I want that proof back. And so you will get a certificate, but these days they might be doing that in a digital format. That's a printable certificate with your name on it. So test prep, actually test prep, this question came to hosts and panelists. How many questions are covered in test prep? Ours has around 600, I think. And if that's not right, Dave, let me know. But yeah, thank you. That's the number I had too. So about 600, at least as many as 3 full exams plus some. So you can take it over and over and you'll get new questions, and that's recommended. So what to do to study and really prepare for this exam? Review your exam content outline. Use your PMP student kit to address any weaknesses. Read the Pinbox 6th edition, chapter 6th edition, chapters 1 through 3 in vocabulary, and the Agile Practice Guide. That's the one that's less than 100 pages. Outside of your student kit, those are the only 2 resources from that list of 10 and the 5,000 pages that we would actually recommend that you read. So just part of the Pinbox 6th edition and the Agile Practice Guide. And then don't read the PMBOK 7th edition for study purposes. It's a great resource. I recommend it, but not for exam prep. Then use your test prep in learn mode, because that's the way to get the feedback on what you got right or wrong and why. And then, yeah, they assign exam dates regularly. So when you go, as soon as you apply to PMI and they accept your application, which we'll get into the application here next, as soon as your application is accepted, then the window will open for you to schedule your exam. And it's basically, most test centers have availability every day, but maybe not tomorrow. You might have to look a week or 2 out to start seeing availability for scheduling. Is there a separate certification specific to Agile? Yes, PMI offers some Agile specific certifications. They have the PMI ACP, that stands for Agile Certified Practitioner. They also have Disciplined Agile. The thing about PMP, now that has incorporated 50% Agile, what I noticed as somebody who teaches the Agile the Agile certifications, the ACP, a lot of that exam came into the PMP. So if you pass your PMP, you're going to have a great Agile foundation, almost as complete as the PMI ACP. It tests a little bit more, but this PMP is pretty comprehensive. So if you go to pmi.org and you go to certifications, they actually separate out the Agile ones. And if you wanted to learn more about those, you can. So once you pass this exam, you will go into a 3-year window where you need to recertify by earning 60 professional development units or continuing education for your certification, and you'll report those to PMI. And with Skillsoft, we have several, actually more than several, I think more than 100 courses out there that are eligible to earn PDUs. You have to be certified first, and then you start earning these, and you can report them to PMI. You could do self-reporting too if you have any independent learning that you're doing. Would you not recommend to do ACP if someone is interested? Maybe PMI will stop it. Great question. So far, we haven't heard anything from PMI about retiring the PMI ACP. It's interesting to see what they're doing in the Agile realm right now, how they've introduced some new certifications called Disciplined Agile. If I could recommend what to do with, if you have your PMP already, this is tricky. Here's what I would recommend. And, you know, at Skillsoft, we don't just teach PMI, we teach other things too. So what I would actually recommend, if you're really interested in Agile, I love our course in the Professional Scrum Master series, and that's offered by scrum.org. I love it. And I know it's not a PMI product, but I think it's a really good curriculum. So if you're interested in Agile, I think that's a good one. And I teach that boot camp, and it comes up every few months that we offer that one. But if it was PMI products only, then I would say there's no harm in getting your PMI ACP or the Disciplined Agile. Both of those help you start your Agile journey. I hope that helps. It's a good question. So what do we do next? The best thing you can do if you haven't done it already is to create a free account with PMI. It's no charge to do this. And by doing this, you are ready to go with your application or anything else that you want to do on the PMI website. Usually they want you to log in first. So from here, we can go to certifications. That is the menu. You can go to certifications and then click to apply for your PMP. So we're going to talk about the PMP application and a little bit about eligibility. So this is the criteria. You have to have a 4-year degree, 36 months leading projects, and 35 hours of project management education, which you do get from our boot camp. A CAP-M certification will take the place of the formal education. But the thing is, it's not aligned to the PMP exam. So I wouldn't recommend skipping the boot camp. I think it's a good idea to have that. Yeah, I'll share the link. Let me see. Here's the link to the free Percipio trial. And then there was a request for the other link. Let me see if I can pull that up. Excuse me a moment while I look at it. Here we go. I need to grab that. And this is going to be the link to the SharePoint folder. So both of those. Now, what if you don't have a 4-year degree? It's okay. As long as you have a high school diploma or associate's degree or global equivalent, just offset with more months leading projects. And is a PMI membership a recommendation, not a requirement? Yes, it's not required. You can you can apply for the exam, you can sit for the exam, and you do not have to be a PMI member. The exam would just cost you more. So if you're planning on sitting for the exam, the membership pays for itself because you save more than the cost of membership on the exam. They have a discounted exam cost for PMI members, so it might be worth it. Let's see. Do audits count as project experience? They do, because it's quality assurance. Audits fall under quality, and it would count. Absolutely. The only thing you have to be careful about is, and we'll get into what to be careful and not to have some pitfalls where we accidentally explain operational work as opposed to project work. So would PMI consider your company training? So if your company is doing some kind of boot camp, 35 hours, I think that they would. So yeah, thanks, Dave. This is good. What Dave just said is important. If you're getting these 35 hours from a different source that's not an authorized training partner, like maybe your employer is offering it, you don't have to get the learner kit. What role counts for experience? Good question. We're going to get into that shortly here. So let's go through the application bit by bit, and work experience will be in there. Academic education means your high school or college. That's what they mean by academic education. So you need to enter your education. In this example, we're using a secondary degree, a bachelor's degree. And then as soon as you fill out the application and meet the minimum requirement, as soon as you finish doing that, it's checked. You see a green check mark, and it lets you go to the next step of the application. So professional education, this means your 35 hours. So this is where the boot camp goes in for those of you who plan to take the boot camp. You would put that in. If it's from other educational institutes on a project management subject, is it valid? I think they're really looking for PMP exam prep related. There are some universities that do have programs that are approved by PMI. So it's tricky. Let me give you an example. Let's say that I just went through a really comprehensive course in Microsoft Project and learning how to perform or how to enter my schedule at work and with my team. That would not be helpful for the exam. So you see how it says courses related to this certification. So you kind of it needs to be related to PMP in the exam content outline. That would be the ideal situation. Okay. Yes. Oh, good point. PMI retained your education from your first certification. That is absolutely true. Your education doesn't expire. So if you've previously taken an exam prep course, it's still good. The only problem is that if the exam changed, you're really going to want to study with the new curriculum. And then as soon as you complete that part, the professional education, you get that check mark, and it will allow you to continue to your work experience. And so you'll notice that while we're doing this, there are no areas to attach documents, because that question came in, do we have to have supporting documentation? You do not attach any documents. The only time that you'd have to provide more proof is if your application was selected for an audit. And if that happens, yes, exactly. If that happens, then you will have to provide some kind of additional documentation. The good news is if you're selected for audit, they're not usually auditing your entire application. They'll just ask you specific question about something. And then you might have to have somebody say, yes, they did do that project work. I was on that team and we did this work and I can vouch for this person's experience. Or maybe they want a copy of your diploma. So it just depends if you do get an audit. If the does the 2-year associate, this came to hosts and panelists. Does the combination of a 2-year associate degree and a 2-year bachelor degree count as a 4-year bachelor? The 2-year bachelor by itself would count as the 4-year bachelor, because there are so many concentrated bachelor's programs these days that a bachelor's degree is a bachelor's degree. So whether you did that as a concentrated course and got it done faster, it's okay. It will still count. Yeah. Okay. Work experience. So here you have your project management experience and the 36 months worth that you need to come up with. So we're going to talk more about the PMP handbook here. So take a look at that. That's worth printing out and or downloading and referring to as you go. And we'll also talk about it here. Now, a question in the chat. My company outsourced the training to an institute. This came to hosts and panelists. My certificate mentions my organization only. Would you recommend filling the company name under the provider field? Yes, I would. I would just, if your organization is the only thing showing up on the certificate and not the training institute, I would put your organization. If it gets selected for audit, you'll have an opportunity to explain the details a little bit more. And so that'll be fine. With the work experience, you're going to put your job title in. There are so many of us who do not have the title of a project manager. I don't think I've actually ever had project manager in my job title in all the years. And it doesn't matter, because you are still managing projects. And that's one thing PMI has really emphasized. You could be any number of things and still be leading projects. So the job title, don't be nervous if your job title isn't project manager. Just put your actual title there. The reporting area, a little bit about your organization. This might feel like, if I answer this wrong, am I going to get disqualified? No, this is all about data. PMI is collecting data here. That's all they're doing. They're just trying to figure out the demographic of anybody taking their exam, get some information about it. Okay. And then the project description. So when you're indicating what the project description is, this is the toughest part of the application. You need to make sure, I'm going to give you some tips on this. Can you use volunteer hours toward your experience? Yes, you can. You don't have to be paid, and you don't have to be an employee of the organization. The tricky thing is they want it to be business related in some way. In other words, volunteer hours, I'm trying to think of how to say this. It would need to be an actual project, not a day. So let's say we had this cleanup day and you were responsible for, coordinating a group for cleanup day. That by itself might not be enough, but if your organization is the one that planned and carried out the cleanup day, and you had tasks and responsibilities before that day and after that day, that's a project. So yes, implementing a new process in an organization is absolutely a project, because a project, it results in a new product, service, or result. And a result can be, we're more efficient. I had a project where we reduced turnover in our organization. We addressed it and we reduced it, and that was a project. For those of you who work on Agile teams and you're creating products, but your team has been working together for a long, long time, they are starting to realize, oh, that is a project. Even though it might not be called a project, maybe it's a product development team. That's okay too. So as long as you're doing new work and in iterations on an Agile team, that's fine. For an auditor, how would one complete the budget question? Here, the project budget. That's a good question. I wish I could remember what's in that drop down. And So I don't recall. If you don't know, you can just give it your best guess, because a lot of us perform project work, but we don't own the budget. So if that's the case for you, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Yeah, use project management terminology. So here are the tips. Use terminology that you learn in class. Avoid jargon from your own industry. We might be tempted to tell PMI how how much we know about our industry and use all kinds of acronyms and highly technical language, but that keeps the person who's reviewing your application, if they don't understand your project work, they could end up auditing it because they need to understand, like, tell it to me in a more simple way. So pretend that you're just talking with a friend and telling them what you do at work, and they're not highly technical. That's how your application should read. Don't try too hard to impress. If your project had things that didn't go well, or if your project was canceled, include it. That's a project management lesson learned. You know that you didn't do all this work by yourself, so include your interactions with team members and other stakeholders. Make sure that you describe a project, not day-to-day operations that are the same and never change. What was unique or special about this project that was different than another? And then include the outcome. So start out with the strategy. Why did you have the project? What was the purpose of it? And then end with the outcome. Can you submit projects in progress? Yes, you can. The project does not have to be completed yet. Oh, another tip, start with the most recent work and work your way backward, because there's an 8-year look back period. If you start with an old project and for some reason you get audited, it's going to be a lot harder to go find the documentation or the person that can vouch for your work for a project that happened 8 years ago. Try to start with the most recent. Let's see. Claim unique months. You can only claim unique months up to the submission date of your application, right to present. And then this part's pretty straightforward. Your address and how do you want your name to appear on your certificate? We'll do that. And then your phone number, contact information. Implementations count. The important thing is that you clearly distinguish the handoff from the day-to-day, because there can be a little overlap after you implement a new process or a new system. But after that, somebody else is managing that, an operations manager or a department. And at that point, your project usually is over unless you're going to continue to add incrementally, maybe new features. Other than that, it starts to get into operations. We have to be kind of careful with those. All right, so phone number, we've got our exam location. Where do you intend to take the exam? You're not selecting your exam date here. They're just doing more demographics at this moment. And then, do you need any accommodations for exam day? Make sure everything looks right and submit your application. Who's ready to go to boot camp? Do you have anybody here who's ready to sign up and join us? We would love to have you. Okay, so October 25th, I will be training along with my colleague, Orlando Sequeira, and we are going to train this in a real boot camp style, meaning that we are going to be there Monday through Friday for 8 hours. It's going to be 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Then we're back again on November 8th. Do you know where to register, everybody? Just want to make sure you know where to go. If you want to register for a boot camp, all you do is find the boot camp date that you want click on it and you can register to attend. Then in 2022, we will be offering boot camps monthly. I noticed at the beginning of today's session, we have a truly global audience. For some of you, that 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. might just not work, and that's okay. We have many offerings for the, I'm trying to think of the time zone for our Eastern time. I think it starts at 3 a.m. So Dave, if you have this information, please help. If you don't, it's okay. But I'm trying to think of what time of day that is if you're in India or if you're in the UK time zone. And now, great question. I'm glad you asked this. Thanks, Dave. I had a feeling you would have the answer. Yeah. So we have different time zone coverage so that if the time zones that we're offering these are not convenient, you can join us for a different schedule. All right. Attendance. This gets tricky. It has to be live. PMI is very particular about your attendance being live, and that's why we have so many offerings at so many different times. If you miss a maximum amount, you would have to make it up. And we actually have a complete video on attendance requirements. So if you don't mind, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and let me find that for you. I'm going to grab our attendance video from SharePoint. I've got it open right here in the background, but I'd like to find it for you. And you can watch this attendance video. I think it's 7 minutes, very detailed about what the attendance requirements are from PMI. That way there's no mystery, and you can be sure that it's for you. So let me go ahead and copy that link. This should work for everybody. And I'm going to chat it in now. Okay, this attendance video also has a slide deck that goes with it. So feel free to watch that. Make sure that you can attend all the dates before you commit to it. Unfortunately, PMI does not allow us to offer a complete replay boot camp. Now, Dave had mentioned earlier, and I'll emphasize that too, that you can watch on replay, but that is not ATP Bootcamp. That is not PMI ATP. You would be completely on your own, and so that's tricky. The ATP Bootcamp is a formal process. Are there other boot camps besides the PMI ATP that would be helpful for this certification? I would say not instead of, but in addition to. I would recommend our Intro to Scrum. That's a good one. And also we have another, which is Intro to Agile. That's a great way to fill up that 80 to 100 hour time block if you're wanting to just practice as much as possible and get ready for the boot camp. I'm going to bring Percipio over. Before we do that, though, I see that we're very close to the top of the hour. If you could please let us know how we did today. This is our survey link. We really appreciate your feedback. Let us know how we did. If you have questions, if you want to see other boot camps, we love to know what you are looking for, because we're always adding new boot camps too. So I'll chat that link in. And Dave, thank you. Dave just chatted the calendar. So with the calendar, you can see all of the upcoming offerings. That's perfect. I'm going to share that right now and bring it over to the screen. So this is an example of the boot camp that begins on the 25th. So it is 10 a.m. Eastern time. And if we click on the session, it tells us a little bit more. Now to register, though, I think we have, I thought that would bring me to the registration, but I might have to get there a different way. I'm just looking at if it's within Percipio that I would need to do it to register. Let me go back over here. Yes, okay, good. So let's say that we want the PMP Bootcamp. Start here in the library. Then go to Skillsoft Bootcamps. From Skillsoft Bootcamps, you can go to Project Management Bootcamps. And like Dave is saying, right now, find your session that you want. So if it's the October cohort, or maybe I don't want that date, I want a different time zone, I can look for that. And if I click here and say, yeah, that's the one I want, it's the October cohort, and I want to click watch, it should bring me to register. Here it is. We did it. We found it. So you can register to join us. We would love to have you. And you don't have to register to attend. That's a great point. You do not have to, but it helps us to know if we have a heads up on how many participants we might be having in that class, then we can make sure that we have support, and Dave's here to help. It's really nice. So I hope that we will see you in an upcoming boot camp. And are there any other questions before we wrap it up? We are right at the top of the hour. We went exactly 2 hours. All right. I'm glad that this was helpful for you. Thank you for sharing. So you're planning your PMP exam in a few weeks. Good. Yes. And knowing how to be the most efficient that you can with your studies. Good. Thank you so much, everybody. Such a pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you in one of our upcoming boot camps and helping to lead you to exam success. So looking forward to that. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dave. See you next time. Bye.